This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 82, Autumn Hallow, Part 1. On August 13th, 2020, a 911 call summoned first responders to an apartment in Elk River, Minnesota, where 8-year-old Autumn Hallow was pronounced dead at the scene. Her father, Brett Hallow, and her stepmother, Sarah Hallow, told police they found Autumn partially submerged in the bathtub, but their story fell apart immediately. The little girl was emaciated and frail, covered in injuries, and missing patches of hair, and she had clearly been dead for at least several hours before the 911 call was placed. The following day, both Brett and Sarah were arrested. In this episode, I will tell you a story of parental alienation, a mother's desperate attempts to save her children from their father's abusive household, and the failure of CPS and the Elk River Police Department to intervene in a dire situation that culminated in the death of a child. I will also tell you the story of a beautiful, bright little girl with unmatched joy for life, who was known for her kindness, creativity, thoughtfulness, and determination, and whose life was slowly and agonizingly stolen by two people who should have protected her but chose instead to torture her to death. This is part 1 of the heartbreaking story of Autumn Hallow. Before I get started, I'd like to shout out my newest patrons, Cleona from France, and from The Twilight Zone, shout out to Brandy B, Sadie N, and Scottish Lassie. Thank you all so much for your support. For any new listeners, my goal is to be able to continue providing quality weekly episodes on a full-time, permanent basis, even after my personal savings runs out. If you'd like to contribute, you can make a monthly pledge at patreon.com/stlcpod or a one-time contribution at sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com/support. Thank you again. Autumn's story has many similarities to countless stories I've covered. It's heartbreaking how many kids I've talked about whose innocent parents tried to save them from abusive parents, only to be rebuffed by Child Protective Services and other authorities. So many times, neighbors and other bystanders have reported suspected abuse, only for the complaints to go all but ignored. Innumerable loving parents have had their children withheld by their abusers until it was too late. These stories seem to be never-ending, but it's my sincere hope that continuing to tell these children's stories will raise awareness and make all of us fight even harder to save abused children before their lives are lost to tragedies like this one. Let's get into Autumn's story. On August 24, 2011, Autumn Lee Hallow was born in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, to parents Kelsey Cruz and Brett Hallow. Autumn was born 6 weeks early by emergency C-section. Right from the start, Autumn's best friend in the world was her big brother, who I'll call NH, and who was a little less than a year older than Autumn. There are so many pictures of the two kids enjoying life together. I'll include some of them in the Facebook photo album for this episode. Kelsey and Brett's relationship was on again, off again, until they ultimately broke up when the kids were very little, at which point they split custody 50-50. The kids spent a week with Kelsey, then a week with Brett, and so on. Brett soon met and ultimately married a woman named Sarah Nasby, who brought into the relationship a daughter by her former partner, Stephen Bassett. Sarah seems like a maybe less than classy individual. In 2013, she was convicted of 2 fourth-degree felonies, physically assaulting a peace officer, and assaulting a peace officer by demonstrable bodily harm or throwing bodily fluids or feces. I couldn't find the specific details of that offense, but it casts a rather interesting light on a woman who, by the end of this episode, you'll recognize as grade A human garbage. According to Kelsey, Sarah didn't like her from the start, and the two of them never really got along. Within a few years, Kelsey began to notice her son returning from his week-long visitations at his father's house with suspicious injuries. When Autumn told her mother that their stepmother was abusing her brother, Kelsey reported the accusations to police, but nothing was done to stop the abuse. By October of 2019, Kelsey was so fed up with her concerns being brushed off that she stopped allowing her son to go to his father's house. Surprisingly, Brett and Sarah put up no resistance to this. Autumn was still allowed to continue visiting her father's home. Until that point, there was no indication that Autumn was being abused, so Kelsey maintained the court-ordered custody agreement as far as her daughter was concerned. Very quickly, however, she began to regret that decision. In January of 2020, Kelsey gave birth to her third child, a baby all called Dee. Autumn, who had always wanted to be a mommy, was over the moon at the birth of her baby sister and constantly wanted to help her mom care for the baby. Dee was only about 2 weeks old the last time she saw her big sister. January 26, 2020 was the last day of Kelsey's visitation week, after which Autumn returned to the Hallows apartment. It was also the last time Kelsey saw her daughter alive. At that time, Kelsey later told police, Autumn was in good health and her weight and development was in the average range for a child her age. Following the January visit, Brett and Sarah completely shut down Kelsey's ability to see her daughter. In March, the COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant quarantine became a convenient excuse for them to deny Kelsey access to Autumn. A little bit later in this episode, I'll go into the lengths Kelsey went to while trying to ensure Autumn's safety. As it turned out, Kelsey was not the only one who suspected there was something dastardly going on in the Hallows apartment. These concerns came to a head at 3:43 p.m. on Thursday, August 13, 2020, when first responders arrived at an apartment complex called the Depot at Elk River Station, located at 10653 172nd Avenue in Elk River, Minnesota. In apartment 214, they found 28-year-old Sarah Hallow performing chest compressions on her 8-year-old stepdaughter, Autumn. First responders took over life-saving attempts, but sadly, they were unable to save her. Autumn was pronounced dead at the scene. Sarah told police that Autumn told her she was going to take a shower, and 40 minutes later, she found Autumn face down and partially submerged in the bathtub. Autumn's father, 30-year-old Brett Hallow, told police he was awakened by his wife's screams, at which point they moved Autumn to the bedroom floor and attempted to revive her. According to charging documents, based on the condition of Autumn's body, law enforcement believed she had been deceased for some time. Autumn was described as extremely frail and thin, and her skin was dry and her hair only slightly wet, which implied she had been removed from the water quite some time before. Her fingers were blue, she was missing patches of hair, and there were abrasions and pin-like marks on her forehead. Investigators found blood in the bathroom. Sarah told investigators her stepdaughter was in good health, but that she hadn't been eating lately. Brett told them he didn't remember much of the events of August 13th. An autopsy by the Midwest Medical Examiner's Office subsequently revealed that Autumn, who was emaciated and weighed a mere 33 pounds at the time of her death, was markedly cachectic and had very little body fat. Her muscles had atrophied, and she had experienced significant hair loss. In addition, there were signs of bruising on her hips and hands and puncture wounds on her head, and she had experienced abdominal and brain bleeding. The autopsy indicated that Autumn may have been asphyxiated. Her death was ruled a homicide caused by homicidal violence, including asphyxial injuries and blunt force trauma. Brett Jason Hallow and Sarah K. Hallow were arrested on August 14, 2020, and in Sherburne County District Court on Monday, August 17th, they were each officially charged with 1 count of second-degree murder without intent while committing a felony and 1 count of first-degree manslaughter. They were held without bond in the Sherburne County Jail. Each faced up to 55 years in prison and a possible $30,000 fine if convicted. In Sarah's mugshot, there is a particularly wicked gouge in the center of her forehead. I've never been able to find an explanation for the wounds, but I have to wonder if investigators took scrapings from beneath Autumn's fingernails to see if Sarah's DNA was present. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension assisted the Elk River Police with the investigation. Charging documents contained allegations that the Hallows physically abused and neglected Autumn inside their Elk River apartment, tying her up when she misbehaved and withholding food from her. Other children who lived in the apartment were also questioned by detectives and CPS workers. Autumn's 6-year-old brother, the child of Brett and Sarah, told them his parents often tied Autumn up with a brown belt before zipping her into a red sleeping bag with only her head exposed. Other times, they tied her hands behind her back with a long gray shirt. The little boy told police that when she is being bad, Autumn had to sleep like that, describing incidents in which Autumn was restrained in the sleeping bag overnight in the living room, kitchen, or bathtub. His sister was punished when she wet her pants, urinated on the floor, or tried to get food. He told detectives that on the morning of his sister's death, when Brett and Sarah were both in the bathroom with Autumn, he heard Autumn screaming and then a loud bang. Sarah's daughter, who I'll call CN, reported similar atrocities to police, telling them Autumn was also tied up so she couldn't access medications. She told the detectives she had seen blood in the bathtub and witnessed Autumn not breathing. Crime scene technicians used luminol to detect blood in multiple places in the bathroom, with the most blood evidence discovered in the shower area. Sarah Hallow denied any cleanup had taken place and said no argument or yelling had occurred that day between herself and Autumn. Brett and Sarah Hallow denied the allegations made by the children. Sarah did admit to police that despite Autumn's severe weight and hair loss, they did not take her to a doctor. Outside the apartment complex where Autumn died, a small memorial was erected by community members, consisting of handwritten notes and signs, along with teddy bears and toys. Sabrina McWilliam, whose sister lived one floor down from the Hallows apartment, told KSTP, "My heart breaks for the mother and the family. I can't imagine what they're going through." Nicole Robinson, who lives in the complex along with her 3 children, said, "It's really sad, especially when it's something so close to home. My heart's breaking for their mom and their family. Horrible." Ms. McWilliams said, "I'm not shocked. Probably what makes me sick to my stomach is I'm not surprised a child died up there. I don't know about other neighbors, but I know personally, being underneath them, I've heard the screaming. I've sat outside and heard the cussing and screaming at these kids." She said she and other neighbors had contacted building management as well as calling 911, and that when officers showed up, the screaming would stop. She also said she saw Brett Hallow on the night of Autumn's death while he was being questioned by police. She said, "He was sitting with the police and there were no tears on his face. Like if my child had just died 4 hours ago, my face would be red, puffy. I would show emotion. He just sat there." On Facebook, 2 days after Autumn's death, her mom, Kelsey, posted Brett and Sarah's mugshots, writing, "I hate you. I hate you both. You have been ruining my life for years, and now you have given me and my family a permanent scar. You took something we will never get back. You neglected and abused my son, and when that wasn't enough, you moved down the line of children you have. I will make sure that Autumn is remembered in the most beautiful way possible because she deserves nothing less. I wanted to give her the world, and I will find a way to make sure I still do. I hope your other children know what you did, and I hope they grow up knowing their sister saved them." Kelsey wrote on Facebook that Autumn was her beautiful, sweet baby, saying her daughter was always smiling and being silly. You loved so much. Your father kept you from me for several months, and then he took your life. I hope you know how much I tried to get you. I hope you know how much I love every single part of who you are, and I am so proud of how incredibly kind, thoughtful, and amazing you are. I have no idea what to do without you. All of your siblings were lucky to have a sister like you. I am so proud to be your mother, and I know you will always be with me." Autumn was survived by her mom, Kelsey, her loving stepdad, Justin Osterbauer, 6 siblings, and various extended family members. On the evening of Wednesday, August 19, 2020, a candlelight vigil was held at Lyons Park in Elk River, where several hundred people gathered to memorialize Autumn. A parade of pickup trucks drove through the park in support of Kelsey, who attended the vigil with several family members. Kelsey did not address the crowd, but Teresa McNamee, executive director of Rivers of Hope, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to domestic and family abuse prevention, said,
"On behalf of the family, we thank you for showing up for them to remember Autumn during this very difficult time. Their grief is indescribable and for reasons unimaginable. It is difficult to understand how her death happened in a place where she should feel safe and at the hands of her parent, a trusted adult in her home. Children and youth face violence in their homes regularly, but all too often, it's considered a family matter, a private matter. We cannot keep this private any longer."
A GoFundMe campaign benefiting Kelsey ultimately raised over $34,000. Autumn was cremated, and some of her remains were placed into one of her favorite Build-A-Bear teddy bears. Eventually, a beautiful 10-foot purple bench was placed outside the Elk River Boys and Girls Club in Autumn's honor. Family and friends celebrated Autumn's 9th birthday on Monday, August 24th, 2020, planting an autumn blaze maple tree in her honor and releasing a beautiful monarch butterfly into the sky. As is unfortunately common in stories like these, I saw a number of keyboard warriors vilifying Autumn's mom, Kelsey, online in the days after Autumn's death. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that's one thing that sends my blood pressure through the roof. It's too easy for anyone who's never been through a custody battle, or family court, or an abusive relationship to second guess with the added benefit of hindsight. It's great that you think you'd be banging on your ex's door to save your daughter, but contrary to popular belief, if you took matters into your own hands, you wouldn't be victoriously reunited with your child. You'd be thrown in jail. The same thing would happen if you tried to defy court orders to send your kids to their father's home. The only reason I believe Brett and Sarah didn't fight Kelsey when she stopped sending her son to their home was because they still had Autumn to take their frustrations out on. The last thing you want to do when you're trying to save your kids from their abuser's legal custody is end up in jail. Once that happens, first of all, you can't protect your kids from behind bars. But second, the family court judge and your ex's attorney will use that as proof you're an unfit parent and strip custody from you altogether. And then there are the people who always say the mom should have taken the kids and run. Run where? They'd easily be found if they hid out with family, and in this day and age, it's nearly impossible to disappear altogether. If they went out of state and were caught, she'd be facing federal kidnapping charges. A great way to ensure you can't protect your children is to spend hard time in prison. People weren't just pointing fingers at Kelsey either. In a comment on one of my blog posts about Autumn, her paternal grandma, Autumn Hallow, said, "Brett's family was also helping Kelsey and not in touch with Brett either during the last couple years. People think we are villains and that we approve of this. That is simply absolutely not true. We were trying to help Kelsey every step of the way, including confronting police on May 23rd by Autumn's paternal grandma and grandpa. I'm doubly devastated because my son I knew is nothing like this. Not at all raised like this. We loved her beyond words." I know everyone has these vigilante fantasies and loves Monday morning quarterbacking in these cases, but the fact that people are always so quick to publicly shame a grieving mother who did everything she could to save her child, or other family members who couldn't have known what was going on, not only angers me, but it sickens me too, and it also shows a disturbing lack of empathy. Anyway, enough of my ranting. According to an incident log from law enforcement, over the 2 years prior to Autumn's death, Elk River Police responded to the Hallows' apartment 30 times. A good number of those calls came from anonymous neighbors reporting hearing yelling and screaming coming from the apartment, a lot of which sounded to be aimed at the children. 5 of the calls were welfare checks. 13 of them were noise complaints. The first was in February of 2019. The most recent prior to Autumn's death was on May 23, 2019. When officers responded to the 31st call to the apartment, which was placed on August 13, 2020, it was too late to save Autumn. I'll give you a breakdown of some of the calls. The number of times the Elk River Police Department failed to follow through is absolutely staggering. On February 12, 2019, an anonymous caller heard what sounded to be yelling at a child. When police responded, the Hallows explained that one of their kids was sick, which led to the screaming, and the male parent was playing an online video game and had animated reactions to the game. The police report said the children in the apartment appeared to be fine and were playing while officers were on the scene. On June 4, 2019, an anonymous caller reported they had heard periods of shouting and screaming, although the noise stopped prior to the arrival of officers on scene. On September 13, 2019, an anonymous caller requested officers speak with the occupants of the apartment and tell them to keep it down. When officers responded, they didn't hear any noise from within the apartment, so they left. On September 17, 2019, Kelsey told police she had not heard from one of her children in several days and asked for a welfare check. Officers responded to the Hallow apartment and noted the child seemed healthy and was not in any apparent danger. In a complaint from September 27, 2019, the child's name is redacted, but based on what we now know, which I'll be going over a little bit later, I'm going to substitute Autumn's brother NH's initials for the redacted name. On that date, police responded to the apartment on another complaint of possible child maltreatment issues. One of the children told officers they could not stand another night there because NH has to do chores, and if he does not finish them quick enough, he gets soap in his mouth, and had his arm held behind him for not doing chores quick enough. On October 5, 2019, an anonymous caller said she could hear loud screaming and crying of a juvenile from an unknown apartment. She also heard what sounded like an adult hitting the child. Officers responded and spoke with the Hallows, who told them one of the kids was acting out of control in response to being asked to clean their room, screaming and acting aggressively. Police reported they saw no marks on the child. It was at some point that month that Kelsey stopped allowing NH to visit his father's home. On November 11, 2019, another anonymous caller made a complaint about yelling from inside the apartment. On November 16, 2019, Elk River Police responded to another call about a male and female arguing loudly. Although the noise had stopped by the time officers arrived, they spoke with the couple, who said there were no problems. On January 1, 2020, an anonymous caller reported a juvenile female, loud yelling and pounding. The police report stated, on arrival, the apartment was quiet and no answer was received at the door. On February 11, 2020, another caller reported someone yelling at a child, saying, "I will hit you." Responding officers listened outside the apartment and heard adults and children inside, but did not note any issues. They received no response to knocking on the door or calling the known occupants. On February 21, 2020, police responded to another call, speaking with parents of juvenile female who was observed by officers to be quite loud. The report stated that the Hallows were advised of complaint. On March 10, 2020, an anonymous caller reported loud yelling from the apartment. The Hallows told police their television had been turned up loud. On April 12, 2020, Kelsey called Elk River Police, saying she was there to pick up Autumn, but the father did not bring the daughter down to her. She told them that their custody agreement dictated she and Brett could only communicate through a parenting app that could be monitored by the court, but Brett had not responded to her messages since March. The report read, I made phone contact with the father, who stated that he had to communicate with the complainant before that he was not comfortable exchanging the children in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. The complainant disputed that and said that a month ago he only said that daughter had a fever that day and the exchange would not occur. The complainant also advised me that their custody papers allows for each parent to have phone contact with the children in common. However, the male half does not allow it or claims the daughter does not want to speak with the complainant. On May 2, 2020, police investigated a report of suspicious injuries to one of the children and made a report to Sherburne County's Health and Human Services. It's unclear whether or not this was followed up by any other department or agency. When asked by 5 Eyewitness News, a Sherburne County spokesman replied in an email statement, in this instance, there are active investigations ongoing, and whether or not reports of maltreatment have been received or parties had contacted this agency will be a part of these investigations. On May 4, 2020, an anonymous caller again reported yelling from the apartment several times a day. On May 24, 2020, an anonymous caller reported loud voices from the apartment. Between May 2nd and August 2nd, Kelsey called police 5 times with complaints that she was trying to get her daughter, but that her ex-husband expressed concern of the risk of exposure to COVID-19 if child is transferred from one parent to the other. On June 21, 2020, Kelsey told police she had not seen Autumn since January. Officers responded to the Hallows apartment, where Brett told them he had just set up a date to exchange custody with Kelsey. He told them his daughter was not able to come to the door at that time, but later had her wave to me from their balcony. Why did the officers consider that acceptable? There's no way they could have seen injuries from that distance. On August 2, 2020, Kelsey told police she had been unable to establish contact, whether in person or by phone, with Autumn or Brett for over 2 weeks. When officers reached out to Brett, they failed to make contact and instead left him a voicemail. He did not return their call. Autumn's is yet another case in which police dropped the ball and the agencies that are supposed to protect children failed to act in time to save an innocent child's life. I've had reviews left on the podcast complaining about the way I frequently call out CPS or similar agencies for their inaction and negligence when things like this happen. But if you don't see this pattern throughout my episodes, with all due respect, you're wearing blinders. Period. After nearly 10 months, Brett and Sarah Hallow accepted a plea agreement, pleading guilty to second-degree murder. In court on June 21, 2021, the diabolical duo openly admitted to beating and starving Autumn in the weeks leading up to her death. New evidence, including security video taken inside the family's apartment, led prosecutors to state that they were prepared to upgrade the couple's charges to first-degree murder, which may have been the impetus for the plea agreement being made. In addition to second-degree murder, Brett and Sarah also pleaded guilty to multiple new charges relating to the abuse of Autumn's brother and Sarah's daughter as far back as 2019. Many of these details will be extremely disturbing and hard to hear. I have to tell you, reading the court transcripts was absolutely devastating. At Brett's plea hearing, overseen by Judge Karen B. Schaumer, Brett was represented by public defenders Cheryl A. Sawada and Chris Johnston. Representing the state were Sherburne County Criminal Lead Attorney Dawn Nias and Assistant Sherburne County Attorney Leah Emmons. The judge and the prosecution questioned Brett about the new incidents as well as Autumn's murder, and he was surprisingly forthcoming. The first incident in question, which was captured by surveillance cameras the sadistic pair had set up inside their apartment, occurred on June 19, 2019, in the bathroom of the Hallow's Elk River apartment. As described by Brett during the plea hearing, his then 8-year-old son, N.H., had just gotten out of the shower, and Sarah, who was in the bathroom with him, accused him of not cleaning himself good enough and having stuff still in his ear. Hearing Sarah berating N.H. and hitting him, Brett came into the room and witnessed Sarah strike his son, causing the boy to cry. Instead of stopping the so-called punishment, Brett admitted to kicking his son in the rib cage. Further, Brett told the prosecutor he was angry with his son, telling him that he could not put shit in his ears. He and Sarah berated N.H. for allegedly holding his stomach in on purpose, and Brett admitted to intimidating his son by getting in his face and putting his hands near the boy's face or neck. When Ms. Nias asked, Brett agreed that at one point he stood over his son on the bathroom floor, called the little boy a piece of shit, and put his hands around his son's neck, and that his conduct likely had a detrimental effect on his son's physical and mental health and development. The next incident took place 4 days later, also in the couple's bathroom. According to Brett's testimony, Sarah found that N.H. had hidden food in the bathroom and began to, in Brett's words, punish the boy. During the struggle, Sarah said that N.H. hit her or bit her, I don't remember which, and then I yelled at him and told him I would cut his hands off if he did it again. Ms. Nias clarified this point, likely to impress upon the judge just how awful a person Brett Hallow truly was. In fact, you told N.H. that if he ever fucking touched her, being Miss Hallow, again, that you would cut his fucking hands off, is that right? Brett agreed with her statement. She continued, confirming that Brett's intention was to terrorize his son before adding, and in fact, Mr. Hallow, when Miss Hallow first called you into the bathroom after discovering the moldy food, the smell was so bad that you actually stepped out for a moment and gagged. And you understood that was how the condition of the food is when you were continuing to tell N.H. to eat it. Is that correct? Again, Brett confirmed her statement. Brett said he again called his son a piece of shit, while Sarah physically forced him to eat the moldy, rotten food, hitting him when he refused, crying. The incident took place over the course of approximately 6 horrific hours, according to the videotape. Following that incident, on July 14, 2019, another incident took place, this time in the apartment's kitchen. According to Brett's testimony, his son was being punished for lying, and Sarah was putting soap into his mouth, and he struggled, and then he was fighting back, so I grabbed his arms and held him so that Sarah could continue pouring soap in his mouth. The soap in question was liquid dish soap, and rather than preventing this from happening to his own son, Brett straddled and physically restrained the little boy on the kitchen floor while his wife dumped a lot of dish soap into his mouth, forcing him to swallow it. The judge asked, "Are you aware that N.H. has indicated that he can no longer be around or even smell the type of dish soap that was used?" Brett replied, "I did not know that." Ms. Nias questioned Brett further. "You recently told law enforcement that this conduct of you holding N.H. down while Sarah was pouring dish soap in his mouth, that happened countless times, upwards of 20 times, is that correct?" Brett replied, "Correct." 2 incidents involving Sarah's then 10-year-old daughter, C.N., took place in December of 2019 in the Hallows apartment. N.H. was not present at the time, but Autumn and the Hallows' 2 younger sons were there. In his testimony, Brett admitted, "I don't know what started it, but she came up behind me and slapped me in my face, so I got angry, grabbed her by her arms. She started kicking, so I put her on the ground and straddled her. And then she started screaming, so I covered her mouth and I prevented her from breathing." He further admitted to sitting on the girl, who he outweighed by probably around 200 pounds, and covering the entirety of her mouth and nose. This incident was also captured on the family's surveillance cameras, as was the conversation Brett and Sarah later had with the little girl, in which Brett denied strangling her because he did not actually put his hands around her neck. The couple threatened CN that if she told anyone what had happened, she would be taken away from them. The final incident resulted in the second-degree murder charge to which Brett pleaded guilty at his hearing. On August 13, 2020, Brett testified. Autumn, Sarah's daughter, and the couple's 2 young sons were again present while Autumn was being punished. According to him, it was built up for peeing in her pants, pooping, the frustration, and looking at her was bad, so Sarah sent her to the bathroom so she didn't have to look at her. She was frail at that point. When asked why Autumn was in that condition, Brett replied, "Neglect, not enough food, abuse." He admitted that he and Sarah had been denying Autumn food and water off and on for about a month, and by that time, they could see his daughter was in a dire state. She appeared exhausted and had lost a lot of weight. She had been forced to stay in the bathroom for some time, Brett said before describing the events of the day as follows. "Well, so that morning, the night before, I couldn't sleep, so I was playing video games. Around 8 a.m., I noticed Sarah woke up, so I asked if she wanted to watch the Shark Week shows that we missed. So I got up and sat on the couch and watched TV, played on my phone. I fell asleep at some point. I woke up around 12, around noon, and I heard yelling in the bathroom. When I was walking to the bathroom, I heard the argument of Sarah yelling at Autumn to clean up the mess. When I got to the bathroom door, Autumn looked at her and said that she would rather die than clean up the mess, and I walked in angry and grabbed her by the shoulder up by the neck area and whipped her towards me and yelled at her for saying it. Sarah then grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall, held it there for 10 seconds-ish. When Sarah let go, Autumn fell on the ground, and I was frustrated and kicked her and told her to get up. And then I told Sarah I would clean the bathroom to get it over with and stop all the fighting. I mean, I wasn't pleasant when I said it. So after that, Sarah went to get a towel and presumably clothes for Autumn to wear. I grabbed a Swiffer and a plastic bag, and I picked up the paper towels that were on the floor, and I cleaned up what was vomit on the bathroom floor. I put the Swiffer against the door, against the wall, and I went and threw the plastic bag away and the garbage can in my bedroom, and I went to the bathroom in the master bedroom, and then I went back to sitting on the couch and watching TV. At some point, I fell asleep again. I woke up around 3, heard a thud in the bathroom, and got up. Walked in, and Sarah was yelling at Autumn, telling her to get up while she was pouring hot water on her. I got to the edge of the tub, and Autumn wasn't responding. I tried to get her attention, tried to get her to move. Nothing was happening, and I started panicking. Sarah's demeanor switched from angry to worried. I picked Autumn up out of the tub, and Sarah knelt down on the ground, and I laid Autumn on top. I laid Autumn's head on top of Sarah's lap, and she tried to get Autumn to respond to her. When that didn't work, I yelled at Sarah to go call 911, and Sarah went to get the phone, and I picked Autumn up and brought her to the bedroom so she would be on carpet and not the linoleum. At the time that he kicked his 8-year-old daughter in the left side of her rib cage, Brett said, he weighed 270 pounds, while Autumn weighed a scant 33 pounds, which he admitted was less than she weighed at age 4.5. Prior to this attack, Autumn had been vomiting. It was later revealed that Autumn had already suffered internal injuries, including a perforated bowel. As for Autumn's confinement to the bathroom, Brett confirmed to the judge that it often occurred for days at a time, during which Autumn was beaten and starved, endured extensive bruising that the couple covered with makeup so others wouldn't see it, and was even tied up using a sweatshirt so she couldn't use her arms. She was also bound to the wall using a belt while her arms were restrained. He testified that while Autumn was punished in these horrific ways, her stepsister and 2 younger brothers were often present and frequently witnessed Autumn being beaten, restrained, and denied food and water. When she died, Autumn was severely malnourished and dehydrated. The majority of Autumn's time during the last month or so of her life was spent restrained and confined in the bathroom when she wasn't doing chores for up to 6 hours a day. The other children were told to ignore Autumn, he said, because the more attention they paid to her, the angrier Sarah got. Her older stepsister was even enlisted at times to keep watch over Autumn when she was tied up. Sarah Hallow's plea hearing took place on June 21, 2020, the same day as her husband, Brett's. Judge Schaumer cautioned everyone in the courtroom that audio and video recording was prohibited, that the facts they were about to hear would be disturbing, and that anyone who could not contain their emotions should leave the courtroom rather than disrupt the proceedings. Evidently, since being in jail, Sarah had been suffering from a shoulder injury that occurred before she was arrested, although she was not taking medication for that condition. She was also diagnosed with some mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and mood swings. Again, the judge walked the defendant through the incidents in chronological order, beginning with the abuse of NH that took place on June 19, 2019, in the bathroom of the apartment. When asked to describe the incident, Sarah said, "I was cleaning out his ear, and he was fighting the getting his ear cleaned, and I had slapped him in the face. His head moved when I slapped him." Assistant Sherburne County Attorney Leah Emmons continued the questioning, asking how NH was dressed at the time. Sarah said, "I believe he was naked or partially clothed at the time." Ms. Emmons asked Sarah to confirm that after Sarah cleaned her stepson's ears for an extended time, approximately 15 minutes or so, he fought against her, so she hit him hard enough that his head moved about a foot, causing him to start crying loudly. Sarah said, "Yes." Next, Judge Schaumer asked Sarah to describe what happened on June 23, 2019. "I was in the home in Elk River in the bathroom, and I told NH that his head was going to go through the wall if he didn't eat his food." Sarah's attorney, Christopher Zipko, questioned her as well, saying, "Just to expand on the judge's questions, this interaction that took place in the bathroom happened when you found NH had hid some food there, and you smelt the food that was rotten, correct?" Sarah said, "Yes." Mr. Zipko asked, "And you became so upset that first you assaulted NH, correct?" Sarah, "Yes." Mr. Zipko, "And then afterwards, at some point after he had bit you, that's when you then started making threats of putting his head through the wall, and you made a threat that you were going to kill him. Do you recall that?" Sarah, "Yes." The judge further questioned Sarah. "Leading up to these threats, or as part of these threats of substantial bodily harm, you were physically assaulting NH, correct? Is that correct?" Sarah, "Yes." Judge, "Including you were punching him with a closed fist?" Sarah, "Yes." Judge, "And while doing that, you threatened that his head was going to go through the wall, correct?" Sarah, "Yes." Judge, "And also threatened to kill him, is that right?" Sarah, "Yes." Judge, "And that was all part of the same incident where you were physically assaulting him, as we already talked about, by punching him with a closed fist, but also when he was crying out or screaming, using a washcloth to push it into his face to try to muffle these screams. Is that correct?" Sarah, "Yes." The incident on July 14, 2019 was discussed next, in which Sarah admitted to putting Dawn dish soap in the little boy's mouth while Brett held him. The judge asked how much soap Sarah put in his mouth, and Sarah replied, "I don't know, like a squirt, like squeezing the bottle." Judge, "He said that the amount of dish soap that was put into his mouth was about half of a mouthful. Does that sound about right?" Sarah, "That could be, yes." Judge, "And you were doing this because NH was not doing his chores in a timely fashion according to you. Is that correct?" Sarah, "Yes." Judge, "And not only did you put the dish soap in his mouth, isn't it true that he was also punished by having to swallow the dish soap?" Sarah, "Yes." Lastly, the judge asked Sarah to tell her what happened on August 13, 2020 that made her guilty of the crime of second-degree murder while committing the underlying felony of child neglect, which was amended by the plea agreement to third-degree assault. Sarah testified, "Autumn had been in the bathroom for a couple of days because she was sick and was throwing up a lot, and so she had stayed in the bathroom. On the day that she passed, I had hit her in the head and was really upset with Brett for the bathroom being a mess, and there being puke everywhere and wanting him to clean it. Basically telling him that he needed to deal with everything, that it was his problem and not mine. And I had watched him grab Autumn by the neck and throw her around the bathroom. I left and was out of the bathroom for a while. I'm not sure exactly how long it was, but I know it was a while. I had taken quite a few pills that I was prescribed during the time. I lost track of time. And then, later on in the day, Brett had went back in the bathroom and said that she was going to take a shower, that she was going to get cleaned up because she had puke on her. And so I wasn't in the bathroom at the time. I was outside getting stuff for her to get cleaned up. And when I walked in the bathroom, I saw her laying in the tub with some stuff coming out of her mouth, and I could see that she wasn't awake and that something was really wrong. Her eyes didn't look normal. They were really just glazed over, weren't moving. And I pulled her out of the tub and she was on the floor, and I ran and got my phone to call 911. And I sat there listening to everything they were telling me to do, to give her CPR and chest compressions and everything, but she was gone." The judge questioned Sarah about previous beatings she had dealt Autumn that had caused severe injuries, including abdominal injuries that might have caused her to throw up, as well as depriving her of food, which caused Autumn to become severely malnourished and to lose a significant amount of weight. To every question, Sarah answered, "Yes." Ms. Emmons questioned Sarah about the incident as well, confirming that Sarah was the one who entered the bathroom that day to find that Autumn had thrown up and made a mess. Sarah admitted that she had hit Autumn, causing substantial bodily harm because of her weak state. At the time, she said, Autumn was hardly able to stand on her own, able to speak very little, underweight and fragile, her eyes droopy. The prosecutor also questioned Sarah about the way Autumn was often tied up as a form of punishment. Sarah said, Brett had the sweatshirt so that he would pull the sleeves around and tie like her arms in front of her and the sweatshirt would tie in the back. She agreed that at times a belt was added to the homemade straitjacket, and that sometimes she and Brett forced Autumn to stand in a corner while restrained that way. There was times when she would be in the shirt in the living room and she would have to stare at a certain spot on the wall. So she would be over by Brett, and any time he would catch her looking away, he would kick her down. Ms. Emmons pointed the finger back at Sarah, who continuously tried to deflect responsibility toward Brett. Well, and let's talk, Miss Hallow, about what you did, because you also hit Autumn, correct? Sarah admitted, Yes, I have, also answering yes when asked if she kicked Autumn. She also admitted that food in the household was her responsibility, and that during the last several months of Autumn's life, due to her actions, her 8-year-old stepdaughter was given very little food and water, causing her to be malnourished and extremely dehydrated at the time of her death. Both Autumn and her brother, Sarah admitted, were given different food than the rest of the family was eating. On one occasion, they had Autumn, who was already starving and dehydrated, confined within a sleeping bag. While the rest of the family ate, Sarah said, Brett put a plate of food on the floor next to Autumn and told her if she was really hungry, she would have to figure out a way to eat it. All of the other children, Sarah said, saw Autumn tied up, kicked, beaten, and refused food and participation in other family activities. As for NH, Sarah said she and Brett told him there were kid jails, which is where he would go if he told anyone what was going on in the home. One of the assaults against NH, Sarah agreed, was because he had told authorities or his mother about the abuse. What may have been that incident took place on November 25, 2018, as documented in a statement of probable cause. It was also caught on the couple's surveillance cameras. The video showed Sarah speaking with either NH or Autumn, threatening the child, If you don't quit crying and talk to me, I'm going to smack you in your fucking head. She then yelled at the child for disclosing to their mother what went on in the Hallow home, asking, So you think that it's better to tell her that I beat the crap out of you? You know it's not a beating for you to get a fucking spanking. She told the child she wanted to make your head go through a fucking wall with how pissed off I am at you. If you're not going to stop, I'm never going to let you see your mom ever again, and that's a promise. Sarah's own daughter, CN, was threatened that if she told, she would lose her mother to jail and never see her again. The couple concealed Autumn's abuse, Sarah said, including putting makeup over a bruise that Brett had given Autumn so she would appear fine during a Zoom call. Further addressing their concealment of Autumn's condition, Sarah was questioned about an instance in which she put makeup on her stepdaughter's bruises after the police showed up at the apartment. They had come to the door and Brett had answered. I guess he told them that Autumn was in the bathroom or something and couldn't come out. And then the officer ended up leaving and going out to the car. And a few minutes afterward, the officer left and went down the road and came back and was sitting across the road in his car and had called Brett's phone and said that he needed to see Autumn and that it would be okay if Brett just sent her down onto the deck there to wave down to the officer. That was, according to Sarah, the last time the police came to the apartment until they responded to Autumn's death. After the plea hearings, Kelsey spoke with Eyewitness News, saying, I feel like them taking a plea deal for less time was kind of the coward's way out, but also I like that they were admitting some guilt, and I knew part of what happened at least. I'm going to end today's episode here, but instead of waiting till next week to release part 2, I'm going to get it out within a day or two, so please stay tuned and make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform so you're notified when part 2 drops. That's it for this episode. Join me next time for the rest of Autumn's story. If you like the show, please follow or subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. And please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit the website at sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com, where you can listen to episodes or become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to bonus content and exclusive gifts. Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Pinterest at Suffer the Little Children Pod, and on Twitter and TikTok at STLCpod. View photos related to today's episode on Facebook and Instagram. For more stories like the one you heard today, visit sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com. This podcast is researched, written, hosted, edited, and produced by Lane. All music for the show is licensed from audiojungle.net. Email tips, comments, questions, or case suggestions to sufferthelittlechildren.pod@gmail.com. For more information about preventing or reporting child abuse, visit childhelp.org or call your area's child abuse hotline. If you see something, say something. Until next week, bye everyone.